In this video, we're going to be building an inexpensive, relatively small form factor gaming PC that's not going to break the bank. This will handle games at 1440p. With the newer stuff, we do have to drop it down to high, 1080 Ultra, and overall, this is actually a really nice little setup. You can put something like this together for a little over $400, and if you go with less storage, then you can come out a bit cheaper. Personally, I do think putting something like this together is worth it given the price of new GPUs and PC parts in general. And the reason I chose the parts that I did is because they're all compatible with SteamOS, so we can actually install SteamOS and Windows on this machine. In my next video, we'll take a look at how SteamOS runs on this, but for this one, we're going to be running Windows. I've got a lot to cover. As we do the build, I'll go over all the parts used, but before we get into it, I do want to mention that this video is sponsored by URCD Keys. I've been using this site for quite some time now. They offer Steam keys, Uplay, Ubisoft, but the main thing I pick up over here are Windows 11 Pro keys. And right now, if you use code ETA, you can get 25% off. So at checkout, we'll just enter the code ETA. That's going to bring the price down to $22.88. They're going to email you that key, and then you can activate Windows. Speaking of that, let's head over to a new PC that I recently built. As you can see, we're running Windows 11, and from Settings, we're going to go to Activation Settings. It's going to tell us that we're not active. We don't have a key installed, so we're just going to paste it right in here, choose Next. It's going to activate Windows for us, and we're ready to go. If you're in need of cheap Windows keys, I'll leave a link in the description, and remember, you can use code ETA for 25% off. Starting out here with the motherboard, RAM, storage, and CPU. We're going AM4, and if anybody tells you that AM4 is dead, it definitely isn't, especially for budget builds. I went with an ASUS Prime Micro ATX board, and I do love going small form factor with my builds, but mini ITX can still be a bit expensive even for B550 boards. So with the Micro ATX, if you use the correct case, you can still get a pretty small form factor here. When it comes to storage, I'm going with a 1TB drive that I got on Amazon during Prime Day. And keep in mind, these B550 Micro ATX boards do go on sale all the time over at Newegg and Amazon. Gigabyte had one listed during Prime Day for around 62 bucks. It looked just like this, but this is the ASUS version here. Since we're on an AM4 platform, we need to use DDR4, and I would recommend at least 16 gigs. It's relatively cheap, but the price has been coming up in the past couple weeks. About a month ago, I picked up 32 gigs over on Amazon, two 16 gig kits for 26 each. Right now, a 16 gig kit is around 35. So I've got 32 gigs of RAM that I'm going with here, but if you went with 16, you should still be good to go. Now it's time to talk about the CPU, and there are a ton of different options for AM4. One of the main options that I see a lot of people using still to this day is something like the Ryzen 5 5600 or the 5600X, but on eBay right now, the Ryzen 7 5700G used is $99, so that's what I'm going to be going with. We're not going to be using the iGPU here, but we've got 8 cores, 16 threads, and all out, this does outperform the 5600. The 5600 has 6 cores and 12 threads. This is not a bad little chip choice, especially at that price point. And it didn't come with a cooler, so I opted to use the ID Cooling SE903XT. It's 123 millimeters tall, so it will fit in the case we're going to be using here. It's going to offer better cooling than a stock Wraith cooler, and these are 15 bucks over on Amazon, so I figured we'd just go ahead and snag this. So I've got the RAM, storage, CPU, and cooler installed in this B550 board. Now it's time to move over to the case, and there's a lot of different options, but this has turned out to be one of my favorite newer, cheaper cases that you see on Amazon, and they pop up all the time. It doesn't really have a name, but it's around 36 bucks, and it does come with some RGB fans for the front and a fan for the rear, but it uses these Molex connectors, and you're not going to be able to control the speed of these fans. They're just going to be on or off. So I wanted to add some different fans here. I got these 3 Dark Rock fans for like 14 bucks for a 3-pack. You can pick them up $6 to $7 individually. And I've got this smaller fan that I already had. It's a bit larger than the rear fan housing, but we should be able to make it work. Plus, I didn't want any RGB here. If you wanted to go mini ITX, this case will also support it. You can see we've got a top mount power supply, and it supports a full-size ATX power supply. Some of these cheaper cases over there support only an SFX. This is a little taller than some of the other ones, but we've got that full mesh front, so it should offer some really decent cooling. Power supply is going to be handled by a Thermaltake Smart BX1 550 watt. It's a non-modular power supply, and if you want to make the build a little cleaner, I would go with the modular, but it's going to cost you a lot more. These are pretty cheap, and you don't have to go with the thermal take. 550 watts is more than enough for the setup that we're going to be putting together here today. Last thing we need to do here is add the GPU, and just like the CPU here for AM4, there's a lot of different choices, but I wanted something relatively inexpensive. We're going used with the GPU due to new graphics card prices, and like I mentioned at the beginning, I also wanted to run SteamOS on this. So what I've got here is the AMD Radeon RX 6600 Non-XT. These cards can be had for around $130 over on eBay, and you might be able to bid out a little lower. Just make sure it's a working card. We've got 8 gigs of VRAM, and we needed a card that also fit in this case. This ASRock version is a little larger than some of the other 6600s on the market, but it does fit this case. I've done all the measurements, but I ran into a little bit of an issue here. I need to remove the CPU cooler that I already installed outside of the case in order to get this in because I need to put it in at an angle. I also had to go through and remove the RAM just to make it fit, but as you can see, I mean, we've got that Radeon RX 6600 right here in the case. Takes one 8-pin PCIe connector. I've got a 550 watt power supply here with this B550 board and that Ryzen 5700G. I added one 120 millimeter fan up front. We've got that 90 millimeter smaller fan in the rear. So we should be able to move a decent amount of air through here, especially given that we've got that big mesh front on this tiny case. Go ahead and boot it up for the first time. And when it comes to this 5700G, it's a 65 watt part, but it will boost up to around 85 watts. The TGP, or the total graphics power on this 6600 is 100 watts, but from Afterburner, I'm actually going to give it a plus 20 boost, so we should be able to take it up to around 120 watts. And what that's going to do is allow us to hit those maximum clocks. First thing I wanted to take a look at here were some benchmarks, and we've got Geekbench 6. With this 5700G, we got a single core of 2079, multi 10,000, and the multi isn't bad. I usually see these going in at around 8,000 to 9,000, so this little 5700G is trucking right along. Next up, we've got some GPU benchmarks with 3D Mart. Steel Nomad coming in with a 1,524, FPS of 15.24, and the final one I ran here was Time Spy, and this is looking right on par for an RX 6600 non-XT variant. We got a total score of 8,444. Now it's time to get into some real-world gaming, and the first one we have here is Cyberpunk 2077. 1080p ultra settings, and I've got Afterburner up in the top left-hand corner. You can see that our TGP on that 6600 does go up to 120 watts, and that's because from Afterburner, I've added plus 20% power, so up to 120 watts, and I did not raise the clock, so these are the stock GPU clocks here. It's just going to allow us to hit those. And I do consider the RX 6600 a 1440p card. I know a lot of people out there might think it's just a 1080, but there is a bit of a catch because at 1440, we do have to drop games down to high and use some FSR and maybe even some new ones down to a medium-high mix. But with Cyberpunk 2077, 1440p high with FSR set to balanced, we can average around 73 FPS with this game. So yeah, I mean, I do consider the RX 6600 a budget-minded 1440p card. We're not trying to max everything out here. We're at high settings, and it's still a really playable experience. Next one we have here is Spider-Man 2, and I was actually really impressed by the performance here. We're not using FrameGen, and that's another thing we could use with the 6600. Most new games do have FSR FrameGen built in, or you could use AMD's Fluid Motion frames, but this game is running great without any frame generation. We're at 1440p high settings, and instead of using FSR, I like using the built-in IGTI scaler. It's set to balanced, and we're well over 60 FPS. Checking out Borderlands 3 at 1440p ultra settings, 100% resolution scale. With this one, no matter what I do, I mean, if you're not playing through the game, it's going to cache those shaders as they kind of appear. You will get some stutters here and there when there's a lot of particle effects on screen, but other than that, this is running over 80 FPS on average.
That's just what I do.
So much to live for.
I also wanted to test out Marvel Rivals, but for this at 1440 with this RX 6600, we did have to take it to medium with FSR set to balance, so you'd probably be better off just playing this at 1080. And given that it's an esports game, I mean 1080 high looks great here, and we can hit 120 FPS with this setup. And the final one I wanted to test here was Doom: The Dark Ages. 1080 medium, FSR set to balanced, and as soon as you start this game up, you'll notice that the VRAM almost goes to 8 gigs just even in the menu. That's kind of the downside to running a card with only 8 gigs of VRAM, but if you don't want to spend the money, you can definitely get by playing a lot of this stuff at 1080, especially a newer game like this. The last thing I wanted to talk about here were CPU and GPU temps with this case and cooling system that we have going on. So for all of the testing, side panel is on, and with that 5700G, we've got that ID Cooling SE908XT. The CPU temps work great with this system. Gaming, we averaged 54 degrees Celsius. Maximum recorded was only 63, but I'll tell you, I didn't run anything like Cinebench R23 or 24 for 10 minutes straight at 100% CPU utilization. I'm sure it'll get hotter than this, but while gaming, that CPU is going to be all over the place. Average of 54, maximum of 63, not bad at all. As for the GPU, with that 20% power boost, I probably should have adjusted the fan curve here. Still using the stock fan curve. Average was 73 and the maximum recorded was 78. We could keep this much cooler by adjusting the curve, and you can do that from Afterburner or another third-party software suite, but we still didn't hit thermal throttle with it. A little hotter than I'd like. Overall, not bad. When it comes down to it, I do think a build like this would be a viable option for somebody who's looking for a budget gaming PC. And like I mentioned, we can also install SteamOS on this. Now, I haven't tested it, but I'm 99.9% sure it's going to run. I'll have a video coming up, and I think that's where this thing is really going to shine. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. If you're interested in putting something like this together, I'll leave links to everything I used in the description below. And remember, we got some used parts here from eBay, so you do have to keep an eye out, read the description, and you might have to bid some of this stuff out to get a really nice price on it. But in the end, it will be well worth it. If you've got any questions, let me know in the comments below. Like always, thanks for watching.